Knowing that the social environment is complex does not mean that one is able to apply complex tools and techniques to manage it. Some human group behavior can be crudely simulated. And one practical example of this is the modeling of human crowd behavior, or crowd dynamics. The computer models produced have a specific application in the built environment, and they focus on the optimal use of space with respect to crowd safety. These models can be used by emergency planners to evaluate pedestrian dynamics at mass gatherings. However, it must be noted that these simulation models only assist in the design process, and that they have been shown to be inaccurate. More crucially, these tools do not capture the behavior of a real crowd in real time and predict what they will do next. This is an incredibly hard problem to solve. Consider how hard it would be to capture the component behavior of each bird in a flock and predict the next move of the flock. Consider how hard it would be to capture the component behavior of the complex social environment in a major project and predict the next move. I'll stay with the bird flock model for a little longer and explain how the standards further misrepresent the concept of nonlinearity. The standards describe a nonlinear system's behavior as not being equal to the sum of its parts. Well, this is true. However, the reality of such a system is impressively complex. Birds that fly in a flock formation appear to be competent at doing so. Rarely does one observe individuals colliding or arguing for position. Of course, no bird was taught to fly in formation. These hardwired traits are a consequence of natural selection, as there are survival advantages in flying amongst a group. Computer models can simulate bird flocking, and they do this by giving each individual bird a set of identical rules to follow. In the context of a complex project, then these rules are equivalent to the behavioral traits and practices defined in the standards. As each bird in the flock must follow the rules of behavior, so must a complex project manager. In computer simulations of bird flocking, it's possible to vary the parameters of the rules, pull the levers, if you will, of the individual simple rules the birds follow. When presented with this opportunity, it quickly becomes apparent that there is no linear relationship between the parameters of the individual bird and the flock formation. One small adjustment of one parameter can break the flock apart, disabling its formation ability. It also becomes apparent that there is no simple causal relationship between individual rules and the flight formation or shape of the flock. If the computer simulations show birds flying in a delta formation and one wants to manage the formation into a simple straight line, there's no way of knowing what parameter to adjust. Indeed, one may need to add new rules to the rule set or start with a completely new and different set of rules. Imagine how hard it would be to manipulate the rules, that is the behaviors, practices and competencies of individuals in a complex project to drive desired behavior. Imagine how hard it would be to know what the nature of these rules were, bearing in mind that the nature of something complex, that means that there are no two projects that are the same, and no generic rules might exist. Well, actually, we've been able to do this for a long time. Earlier I showed you the complex behavior of vehicles at an intersection in Delhi. We can successfully manage complex behavior by installing traffic lights at intersections and prosecute those who disobey the rules. We manage complex behavior by reducing complex behavior. We make the system more deterministic. We suggest that determining whether or not a project is complex appears to be a wholly unproductive activity, and that attention should be drawn to solving the issue of major projects. Having set out our current understanding of what complex means, and the approach taken by the college can be assessed as not having justified that the projects in which they are interested are complex. Indeed, the projects listed in the fellows' resumes, whilst large or major projects, well, they're hardly unique. The additional demand for complex project managers is not justified. Finally, the requirements for new tools and techniques is not based on any critical evaluation of either the espoused theory or the theory in practice. Shortly, I will consider the content of the standards in more detail, but for now, the process by which the college and the standards have emerged is worth stating. During 2006, there were extensive efforts on the part of the protagonists of the college to recruit senior practitioners as fellows of the college. Now, in doing so, this provided implicit endorsement of the college, its aims, and the processes of the organizations that the fellows represented. This appears to be running the risk that the existing approaches, which can hardly be said to be working effectively, are simply reinforced and further legitimized and institutionalized. What problem is this initiative trying to solve or be part of the solution to? And by what analysis is the addition of further competencies to individual project managers the solution to challenged performance in major, let's say, military projects? A further analysis of the issues may, for instance, find that the issues are more systematic rather than under the influence of the project manager. Now we're talking about complex behavior. Issues such as the ownership and management of risk and opportunities rather than outsourcing risk may be at the root of the problems faced. But without further analysis, we can only speculate on this. Intuitively, the supply of project managers is unlikely to be at the root of such an analysis. Any credible business case for change must consider root causes. The situation is clear to us. The development of the college and its standards has proceeded without checkpoints and with political support rather than intellectual input to test the core concepts. We see that the complex standards create the potential for an entirely new training industry and certification industry to add to the current melee in this area. The business case for this is not clear, and neither is the level of control that the college will exert in the future over the content of its standards. Notwithstanding the challenges I've already identified, the definition and the process being both flawed, the content should similarly be treated in a critical manner. It's not clear what research has underpinned the development of the complex standards. Not from the standards themselves, it's not. The competence levels appear to have been allocated on an entirely arbitrary basis, as any attempt to rationalize the allocation of competency levels in this example shows. The bottom right image is the key to the 4 levels of competency. We think it perfectly reasonable for the authors of the standards to demonstrate the empirical evidence for the practices that will be driven and enforced through these standards. Since my first stance against the wave of complex project management, I've been approached by numerous people in the business of project management, accreditation and certification, and they are concerned by the complex standards. Consider how a certifier of the standards would validate evidence to certify a complex project manager as competent. Concerning examples are not hard to find. Here, certifiers are required to validate evidence that the practitioner is competent in myth creation and walks their talk. Another example, View 10, Special Attributes, Element 10.1, Wisdom. Practitioners have a robust self-esteem, a sense of wonder, and reserves time to sit back, relax, and mull over issues. How does a certifier validate that? As I said at the beginning, we are concerned with no empirical evidence to support it, These complex standards will drive project managers to apply the knowledge and theories of metaphors, rich pictures, anti-positivism, punctuated equilibrium, and the butterfly effect. These terms have more in common with the chapter headings of a compendium on postmodernism than they do with real people managing complicated projects. Whilst they provide views of the project environment, they are relatively undeveloped in their application, rich pictures in soft system methods being the possible exception. It would be interesting to hear an application of the butterfly effect. So, the definition of complex does not stand up to any scrutiny. There's been no analysis of the problems that the establishment of this initiative is intended to solve. The process by which the college and the standards have progressed has gone unchecked, and the standard is not established on evidence-based practices. A good place to start is with the understanding of the problems faced in the kinds of projects embraced by the college. Now, we have described these, and others have described them as major rather than complex. One research question we could ask is, what has been the root causes, not assuming they're generalizable, of failure in major, let's say, defense procurement projects? Causal answers would provide the foundation for determining the nature of the initiatives that would start towards improved performance. Other research questions could be, how do you measure complexity in a robust manner that takes account of structural dynamic and elements that interact? And in what conditions are the current tool sets effective? What is in the expanded tool sets for very complicated projects that's not in the standard set? And under what conditions are different interventions effective? A final and brief comment on these questions. We suggest that identifying the root causes of failure requires a most significant research investment. Hearsay from managers and participants is simply not enough. Project data would need to be objectively scrutinized to find causal links, and evidence would need to be validated. Only then can we begin to identify real root causes and begin to glimpse the amount of information required to cope with and understand these large or complicated undertakings. The competency standards for complex project managers are undoubtedly flawed and cannot be considered a starting point for any inquiry into the effective tool set for bringing about control in very complicated bodies of work. Thank you.